This is about the messenger, Muhammad, and the claims around it.
Oh, this is the most unbelievable. I mean, the greatest event. This will be the greatest celestial event since the creation of the universe, and nobody has witnessed this. If you think about the Arabian Peninsula, you'd have had Romans, you'd have had Zoroastrians, the Jews, and the Christians. I don't know how far the moon will have been seen, but sure all the way to India, China, and Africa as well. And nobody has recorded the event. Nobody has written it down. No one makes mention. It'd be great. So you asked the question: what was the point of Allah doing this if no one's considered to record it?
I guess we can ask the question: what would a Muslim say in this case? Right? We can try and come up with ideas or what they would say. So one sort of not particularly good idea that a Muslim could say is, hey, you know what? He did split the moon, but again, this was a miracle event, and Allah, in His wisdom, only let the believers see the moon was split and nobody else. To everybody else, it looked like it wasn't split. Therefore, you can't deny that the moon was split.
Right. Two
You know,
things
it
on that.
goes even worse. You know that there are Muslims who are actually saying it was intended for the people who challenged him, so only the people who challenged him could see that it's spilt into. Nobody else could.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just speculating that's an answer. Go on, Thunderous.
The other thing is that I
Oh
hear
no,
that it was
Stops.
actually because what Thunder said is that it wasn't seen in India. Well, somebody in India actually mentioned this.
That's a fake story. It's fake news.
I
I
know.
remember reading that as well.
Yeah.
The thing is, Rob just mentioned about performing the miracle for people who are the believers. The thing is, you see, in history, if you was going to go by the logic, then all those other miracles that happened in previous times were witnessed by non-believers as well as believers. So
Yeah,
that doesn't work because it's
yeah,
not consistent.
yeah. That's true, Thunderous. But then a Muslim can say, well, this particular one wasn't meant for the non-believers, right? So they could just say, well, it was only meant for the believers. So even if other miracles were for non-believers, this one wasn't. I mean, there's no evidence of this in the Quran or anywhere else, right? So this, if again a straightforward reading suggests that if this miracle happened, then non-believers should see it. And if that wasn't the case, the Quran would have, again, if it was a clear, concise, and complete book, would make it clear that it was only for the believers, which means the rest of us, it's a trivial, unfalsifiable claim, and we can just move on. Because anybody could say that. I can say, hey, I've got an invisible dragon outside that only I can see. It's invisible to everybody else. You can't disprove it.
Hmm.
It's a
The thing
trivial point,
is,
and anybody can make that claim, right?
Yeah.
but then it kind of like makes a mockery of the miracle, then, doesn't it? That the whole point. I mean, we're not talking as something where it's behind closed doors, where Muhammad is doing something. We're talking about the single largest object that's near to our planet that would have had the center of our solar system reflecting off this. And you're saying that Allah only made the believers see this. So what the fuck was everybody else doing during this period of time? They were sitting around campfires, they were out at night. Only Muslims saw this, and non-Muslims didn't see this.
Yeah, I mean, a Muslim will come back and say, well, hey, Allah's all powerful, right? It's possible that he could have blinded the non-believers into
That
seeing
should be
what they
mentioned.
originally saw. But
Yeah, but that would be a miracle as well. Allah blinding how many millions or how many hundreds of thousands of people is a miracle in itself that He blinded them not to see this, and Allah doesn't mention that miracle that coincides with this miracle.
yeah, it's just, if they go down that route, it's an unfalsifiable claim. We've got no way to establish whether this is true, and anybody else can make the same claim. So, but I'm just thinking, what could a Muslim possibly say here?
It was probably cloudy. It was cloudy at night, and there was a hole in the clouds, and that hole in the clouds was the only avenue for anybody to see the moon directly. That's the
No, no,
miracle.
they specified one half went and behind the mountain, the other half didn't.
Oh, is that in the Quran?
Not in the Quran, no.
Oh, okay.
In the Quran, it just says it's split in two.
Yeah, bad
And
spelling.
Zakir Naik has commented on this. I remember him commenting saying that he puts it in very sort of like allegedly, but kind of hinting that it's there about the fissure on the moon as evidence that the moon was split.
Yeah. Ah, there we go. Okay, so in this particular case, he's claiming that the unbelievers did see it. I was just wondering how a Muslim could possibly respond to this. But if the claim is that the unbelievers did see it, then you're quite right. In fact, if everybody in the world saw it, if it stayed up for some time, presumably longer than one day, then almost anybody around the world would have seen it at some point, and they would have made note of this amazing feat, and it would have affected the oceans and gravity and all the rest of it. So there would have been effects on the earth in any case if that happened again, unless you're going to claim that the earth was contained and in a miracle. So if you're going to try and do that, you then have to invoke another miracle to protect your first miracle, and so that sort of absurd chain continues.
Yeah, you have an imbalance, a gravitational imbalance. I mean, come on, the consequences are quite grave. So, anyway,
yeah.
number 2.
Well, didn't he go to the temple? Didn't he say he saw the temple, but the temple had been destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE? So that's a load of rubbish.
The thing is that it says that he flew to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, where they don't specify where it is. They never specify. I mean, Jerusalem is not mentioned in the entire Quran. And then he landed there, tied it outside, and went in to pray. Now, a lot of Muslims are saying, well, any place that you can, pray in is called a masjid. So it could be also an area. But the language used does not imply an area, but it implies a building.
I'm of the opinion that he's trying to, because I think it's in the Hadith where it's the old Jewish temple, which was this is where he doesn't know what's going on. He thinks the temple's still there. He's referring to that because by going to that location, he's trying to religiousize, if you like, his journey by going to Jerusalem, and therefore, because when he goes upstairs to heaven, he's speaking to Jewish prophets. So he's got to make the parallel and the Jewish connection there.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that, well, obviously in the story it doesn't say when this happens, but it must have been somewhere around 622. The problem is this was only built 100 years later. So the people who made the story up placed it into a time that was 100 years earlier, thinking that because it's 100 years earlier, people cannot, check anything anymore, so they can make up whatever they want, and people can't verify this. So they made a mistake with some things because we can't check when it was built, and they made a mistake. So it's just a true and honest mistake, and that's it. But Muslims will not accept this, of course, because they will find all sorts of excuses not to see it like that, to not have any kind of mistake in there. I mean, the whole story this is the longest hadith in the whole collection, right? So there's a lot of detail in there, and as Thunder says, he speaks to the Jewish prophets, and he goes to this, on the second floor he goes and meets Jesus, on the third this, on the fourth this, and then finally he speaks to Moses and Abraham and all that. And it's Moses, all right, the Jew, Moses, who tells him, no, go back, talk to him again, I'm sure you can haggle with him. So he goes from 50 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. And then Moses says, well, now you're down to 5. This you can give to people. So go back to your people and tell them they have to pray 5 times a day. So Moses decides, the Jew decides how many times Muslims have to pray. So this is great.
Which is if you like, a bastardization of the biblical accounts where Abraham's talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and if there are 50 righteous, 40 righteous, and he gets down to 5 righteous people. So he's taken that. And interestingly, I was listening to a talk by Yasser Qadi, who was saying that before he received this or had the night journey and got the order from 50 down to 5, Muhammad was actually praying 50 prayers, but he was doing it without anybody noticing.
How do you
And that's
do that?
it's in his talk about the ascension to heaven. It's in his talk about the ascension to heaven, because he's asking the audience, well, how many rakah for this prayer? How many rakah? And then they get to like 52 of like whatever it is, postures and whatnot that he has to do. So it's on Yasser channel, Epic Masjid.
Okay, I'm lazy, but anybody can go and take 24 hours, multiply it by 60, find out how many minutes, divide that by 50,
Yeah,
or subtract 8 hours for sleep, and then see what you're left with, and then see how many prayers you manage.
it's that thing about it's when you count the sleep as well.
Isn't that nice? You see, this is the proof. This is the proofs. How many? No, this is the
This
third
is a
proofs
miracle. This is a miracle, right?
that
But then
Muhammad was a true prophet because a tree shed tears for him, like the donkey that committed suicide for him.
but the thing is, Yasser going back to Yasser again, Yasser told the story of when Muhammad gave a khutbah and the timbers he was standing on also were crying. The timbers, the pieces of wood. Yasser says this.
Well,
So
there's the story where he says he had a slave, one of his slaves, built a pulpit for him. And the tree that he was normally leaning against was so sad that he was no longer leaning against it but was standing on the pulpit, that he put his hand on the tree. This is what made the tree happy, so it shed a tree tear for him. And this is the proofs. And the third evidence is that this is a true prophet, because this has never happened to anybody else, only to Muhammad, which is proofs that this is a true
Yeah, and I mean,
true
all you have to
prophet.
do, of course, is deconstruct it a little bit. How do they know it was a tear? How do they know it wasn't some liquid that came about? And how exactly does a tree shed a tear? And of course, nobody's going to be able to tell you. Presumably, they're just going to say it's a miracle. Well, how do you know it's a miracle? How do we determine a miracle from not a miracle? And particularly in this case, how do we know that a tree shed a tear and that presumably it was a miraculous tear as opposed to a natural tear, whatever that might mean? How do you establish that? Right. So if you ask a few questions to dig under the surface of these sort of very vacuous claims that might sound good to the gullible ear, you just see that there's no answer to this. It's a case of you've got to have faith that this happened.
and the thing is, it's invoking the thoughts that the tree has the ability to hear rather. So you think about the process and the biology required to hear frequency that's traveling on airwaves, and then you have to have a consciousness to understand language and to have free will as well, to have the language understood and then to react to it emotionally. The logistics for all of this are pathetic.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't even go that far, though, Thunderous, because they would presumably say that this is a miracle, so none of that needs to take place. Somehow God made the tree weep. But okay, how do we establish that particular event, without all of the natural occurrences that you talked about, even if it was a miracle, how do we establish that it was in fact a miracle and it wasn't somehow liquid through a natural process? How can you do that? You can't.
But the thing is, you see, but the whole point of them saying it shed a tear evokes an emotional reaction. I hear what you're saying by that, but they're implying something completely different. And I don't quite understand why would Allah make the tree cry then? So it's against his will. So it's against the tree's will. So Allah's forcing the tree to do something that's against the tree's will, assuming that the tree had free will in the first place.
But I don't think anybody will think that a tree has any sort of free will anyway. It just does what biology does, and Allah can change the biology to make it manifest this tear as a sign to mankind or to show that Muhammad was a wonderful guy or whatever the case is. But I think, again, if that's the best he can do, it's very underwhelming at best, because there's no way to tell the difference. If there was suddenly a fireball that appeared or some sort of event that could not be explained through natural processes, that would be more impressive. But this is totally mundane at the best and can't be proven or disproven.
The thing is that the Quran says that everything prostrates to Allah. So the whole universe has conscience. And it doesn't matter whether you're a rock or a tree or whatever, you prostrate towards Allah, you have the consciousness to realize who this Allah is and what this God actually is. So they are just making, like the rock that ran away with Moses' clothes. You know, you have a lot of these things that you see where inanimate objects are suddenly organic and able to interact with nature, which of course normally they don't. So there's a lot of these things. The Prophet would often lean upon a tree and deliver sermons. This is the story. Okay, maybe I should let the whole thing. Okay, I'm sorry.
Totally.
I've stole the thunder here because I didn't know. Water flowed from his hands. Let me first get. There seems to be. They always bring two things on the day of whoever you treat. If you had no water to drink, would you accept a small pot of water? He then placed his hand into the pot and water began to flow from his fingers. Okay, now this is finished. Okay, so we have a claim here that somebody put his hand in water and water began to flow from his hand. Well, if you put your hand in water, then water is going to come dripping off your hand.
Especially if something's full, right? It's going to overflow.
I'm surprised he didn't stick out his tongue for other people to suck on his tongue if they were that person.
Everyone drank and made ablution from that water that day. Super. He fed 300 people with food that was prepared for two. That sounds very awfully familiar. Following the Prophet's marriage to Zainab bin Jash, he received food from Salam, enough for two. He then told Anas bin Malik to gather his companions. After some time, they were about 300 in number. The Prophet then fed all the guests until they were full. Until they were full. All 300. I've heard that somewhere before, that there was a prophet who did something that suddenly he was feeding a lot of people. I wonder
Jesus
where they get this from.
Yeah. How do you establish that he fed these 300 people? I mean, this is just a claim, right? How do we establish that?
Okay, and the miracle claim here is that you can feed 300 people with just a loaf of bread or something. Okay, great. I mean, this is wonderful. The problem is, why isn't then this happening today? Where is Muhammad today? Where this is not for a wedding, but people are dying because they don't have food. This is not a festival here. We are like, it's a matter of life and death, and there is nobody to feed them.
Yeah, but Stops, that's too easy for them to answer. I don't think that's a strong critique for a gullible person, right? An easy answer that a Muslim come back with, that was a special occurrence and there was a special reason. Allah knows best, and there's a reason. Everybody's going through a test today, and they can sidestep that very easily. Not substantially, but easy enough for people not to take it too seriously.
Yeah, but then it's not a merciful God, is it?
Well, they claim it's a test. Again, we can go into that as a separate point. I just think
killing children
is just not strong enough.
Killing children is a test?
They're going to claim he's not directly killing them, obviously. But that's a separate thing, right? We can talk about that separately. I just think it's easy for them to sidestep, not with a good substantial answer, but with just sort of saying, well, it was a one-off event. God is not doing miracles all the time, and that's it. Right? Any Muslim who hears that, who's full into the thing, who's not thinking critically, will just accept that and move on, right? They think you've been refuted.
Yeah, this is true. Okay, evidences. The 6. He came with the Quran, a book like no other. What is that? Yeah, but how is that?
Let it finish, Stops, and then we'll deal with it.
It is undisputed that the Holy Quran is the greatest miracle. It is undisputed?
With who?
Evident from its historical precision, linguistic perfection, and the many prophecies it accurately foretold. Oh, goodness.
Let him finish the claim, and then we can just deal with it quickly.
Isn't this the end? There's a full stop here.
Oh, I don't know. Is it?
The Quran, in fact, presents a challenge to humanity to produce something like it. A challenge which this day has remained uncontested.
Wow. Okay, stop there, Stops. How many errors and claims, unsubstantiated claims, can you put in 3 or 4 sentences? I'll give a few, and then I'm sure you can add to it as well. Well, firstly, it's not undisputed. People had disputed even at Muhammad's time, so that's not the case. The claim that...
Well, let's go through them one by one. because it starts, the inconsistency starts right in the beginning. Because it says here, he came with the Quran, a book like no other. How is that a miracle performed by Muhammad?
He didn't even have a book, did he? It was just a recitation. A recitation isn't a book.
It wasn't even
But
complete.
it was not by
was
him.
it? Yeah.
All he's doing, he's a parrot. How is it a miracle if a parrot says Allahu Akbar? There's a parrot in Arabia who's doing exactly that.
Well,
All Muhammad is doing.
Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, there's no other book like that, right?
Yeah.
Is that a miracle?
Yes.
So
Please
obviously
give us
what they're
something
going to
that
say
is-
here, yeah, but I think they're going to try and substantiate it with the bits after this, right? So this first part is a mundane claim. I mean, this is just the main claim, but it's a mundane claim unless you can back it up. Because other books, virtually there's no other book like any other book. Each book is unique unless you copy it, right?
So there's no big deal. This is nothing for a prophet. It is undisputed. Okay, sorry, Rob, you carry on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's undisputed. I mean, where's the claim, or how do you substantiate that it's undisputed? By whom is it undisputed? His gullible followers or other people? Other people at the time, many people disputed it at the time. They thought he was a lunatic and so forth. People
Al-Razi.
wanted to kill him and all the rest of it. So that's not true either. And the
And-
greatest miracle, how do you establish the greatest miracle? What is it that makes one miracle better than the other, and why should we accept that? Again, Facebook user, I'll wait for you to respond in any... Hey, I'm going to set the bar very low. Just make it coherent. Don't even worry about substantial. You need to get over the coherent bar at this stage, which you should do trivially, easily, but then give us something substantial.
And the thing is, as well, if you can add on to that, the people who did challenge him got executed for challenging him. So people challenging him, they lost their lives.
Yeah. Evident
Okay,
from its historical precision, linguistic perfection, and the many prophecies it accurately foretold. Okay, so historical precision. What do you consider historically? We've read the Quran. We're reading it again now. What do you consider precision? Obviously, we have a very, very different bar for what precision is. Any claim you want to bring up the most precise claim you will in the Quran, and we can improve upon it and make it more precise. Does that mean that we are better than your God? What do you consider precision, and why should we accept that standard? We did that years ago as well. I did it with one random verse, and I just added a few words that made it far more precise. And I had a Muslim on the show. He had to accept that mine wasn't, which was, of course, completely incoherent. But that's what he had to do. That's why you're stuck with this book. That when you show that it can be more precise, then you get a Muslim saying, no, that's not more precise. When any human being that has a small level of critical thinking can see it's more precise. And the prophecies, go on.
I was just because it talks about historical precision. So for me, when I read that, I'm looking at the Stops is probably sniggering there, knowing where I'm going to go with this.
Yep.
When it talks historical precision, from my perspective, I'm always looking at it from the perspective: does it match with secular history? So when I look at the Quran and I look at secular history, I don't see them calibrated, not even in the slightest.
Not
And,
anything,
yeah,
exactly.
you know, there's the only things it touches on are what's already mentioned in other books. Okay, so that's not historical precision. That's a repeat at best, when it's not bastardizing the story in the first place. And second of all, I mean, when it touches on history, when it mentions something, yes, Dul Qarnayn and a copper covered or brass covered iron wall, or Solomon and the Hoopy Bird and things like that, or even the death of Jesus for that, we do not find it, if you like, calibrated with the history that we know is written down and accepted.
Now, there's nothing historical there. And the other thing is there are anachronisms. There are things mentioned in the Quran which don't fit into the era that they are being associated with. So it's actually exactly the opposite of historical precision. Then the linguistic perfection, well, there are thousands of grammar mistakes. I've shown a couple which are very easy to demonstrate. And then the prophecies, we know there is not a single prophecy, not one prophecy in the entire Quran. Never mind accurately, not even vaguely.
On the point of prophecy, though, what I find peculiar about what they've just done there is the Quran is supposed to be in heaven beside Allah, created or uncreated. So prophecy actually belongs to Allah. So why is all the other stuff promoted Muhammad and then Allah gets something sort of like towards the tail end. Have you noticed that?
And wrong as well. Yeah.
And wrong. So surely Allah would have got the more mention or the bigger mentions as opposed to Muhammad. But Muhammad is getting more mentioned in all of this than Allah.
Okay, then. Okay, I think should we go through this again? Something like it. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is.
How could this be a challenge? How is this proof? How is this the indication that a person is a prophet who says, well, exactly. Well, if you doubt what is in this book, well, bring something like it. But it shows you that you are so insecure, that you are so not convinced of your own product, that you need to say, well, produce something like it, and you will never be able to. And if you try it, you're going to go to hell.
We read that last week.
Satan brought something like it with these satanic verses. He fooled Muhammad and he fooled the audience that are listening to satanic verses. So that challenge was already met in Muhammad's lifetime already.
Okay, so this is I think this was the end. A challenge to which
stop there. Okay. Go back 1 sec. Yeah, I mean, no, it doesn't matter. Don't go back. It's fine. But the challenge like it is a shifting of the goalposts, right? So if I said to you, I have got a book that came from Shakespeare that was inspired by the Lord of the Worlds, and somebody says, well, why should I believe that? I say, because you cannot write anything like it. You need to produce something like it. And the first question somebody would have is, well, that's a shifting of the goalpost, but what are the criteria? And those criteria, why should I accept them? What is your criteria for like it, and why should I accept it? Because all I have to do is make up my own criteria and say, hey, it's like it by my criteria. Why are yours better than mine? And even if a God did that, right, all a God is doing is giving criteria that he wants to give, which is entirely his arbitrary decision. Again, that's not impressive at all. We need something objective that's agreed upon by all human beings as to what this criteria is.
Everybody, a round of applause. What do you mean? Do you mean you've abandoned us? You've been going somewhere else? My goodness. No, good job. Timed out, of course. Okay, the other thing is that we know of the satanic verses. So in other words, the devil has managed to do something. And then, of course, you have 30 different Qurans within the first 200 years. So they all have come up with something similar, with a book like it. So much so that everybody believed it. They recited it. And even today, it's very easy to show how stupid this claim is. You have the Hafs and the Warsh versions, which Muslims tell us are so similar that they are nearly identical. But they are similar, they have different wordings, so the one is a book very much like it. So the Muslims themselves are showing that this is wrong. So this is actually quite funny. Oh God, it shows the stupidity.
But the other thing is this poor fellow can't follow along what we're doing here. We're showing that the claims in this video, my friend, are vacuous and in error. That's what we're doing. I mean, you do need to follow along here.
Okay. I have one more. StreamYard.
Well, I'm glad you agree that we are practically monkeys. Well, that's what evolution says. I'm glad to hear we've got a Muslim who believes in evolution. That's a rarity, I have to say.
Ah, not bad.
Yep, there we go. You going to make it full or no?
What?
There we go.
Thank you.
Another miracle is all of his incredible statements about the end of time. Incredible, I say incredible, but they're credible for us. We believe them. They might be incredible for other people. Because incredible means unbelievable, but we believe them. But I'm using it hyperbolically. So anyway, the Prophet ﷺ told us, who told the Prophet that the buildings in Mecca would reach the tips of the mountains?
I'll just stop it there, Stops. I didn't find that one, right? Because that's slightly different to what other Muslims claim. They'll compete with tall buildings, right? So is this a different one or is it the same one?
Same one.
So he's misconstrued it to begin with. they will
Well,
compete.
he's paraphrasing.
Yeah, but when they compete, that's got nothing to do with reaching the height of mountains.
Yeah, but that's what it says in the Hadith. The naked Arabs will compete with each other building tall buildings.
So it's got nothing to do with in relation to a mountain. Which mountain? Mount Everest or some other mountain? How tall is a mountain? What do you describe a mountain as? Something that's 10 feet high, 100 feet?
Yeah,
or
this is
constitute a
paraphrasing.
mountain?
Yeah, okay. I understand what you're saying. Yes, this is definitely using a different path to do the same thing, yeah.
Who could have imagined that in the 7th century, to have skyscrapers that reached the tips of the mountains? Who told the Prophet ﷺ that the mountains of Mecca would have tunnels?
Where does it say that?
I don't know. This maybe they have, and maybe I don't know what he's doing here.
I mean, it's in a hadith. When
Oh,
the
it's in
mountains
the
of
hadith. Notice he doesn't
Mecca,
tell us which one, right?
when the base is drilled open.
So this is also some. Okay, this will probably be some hadith saying something about when the base is laid bare or something. This is like the knocking, and this is a pulsar and things.
Hang on a sec. Let me just check here. Okay, so it says a hadith here. I'm just looking at it now. It's not clear. Do they say which?
Do you have the original source? Maybe it's in the description.
No. I'm just looking online for this. Sign of the end times. Prophet Muhammad said, if you see Mecca with holes pierced through its mountains and the buildings reach the mountain tops, then know that the hour has cast its shadow. This is not from me, by the way, but there's the hadith number.
Okay.
If you see Mecca with holes pierced through its mountains and buildings reach the mountain tops, then know that the hour has cast its shadow. Whatever the hour casting its shadow, I mean, what's that, like end times, right? Well, which mountains, firstly, and what are holes pierced through its mountains supposed to mean? And now, of course, they're going to equate that with tunnels being built. This is the... It's
desperation.
You have to sigh, right, when you think this. But this is the human mind that is looking for patterns. They already believe it so firmly that now we're going to go look for something that matches it. The exact opposite of the scientific method, which is let's put forward a hypothesis. We don't know what the answer is going to be, and whatever the evidence pushes us towards, we will accept that. This particular sort of thinking is, hey, we've got a conclusion. Let's look in the world to verify our conclusion in some way that is remotely, you can make some sort of vague connection, and it's just incredibly poor and uncritical thinking.
It is, eh? Yeah, but then at the same time, it's also deceptive because, I mean, this guy is not stupid. He knows that he's wrong. He knows that he's grasping at straws. He's just trying to make it palatable for others.
It sounds like
he's
Hamza
just trying
Yusuf, right? It
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
like his voice now.
Yeah.
And again, for
So
some reason,
he
he's
knows
revered by
exactly
some
that-
Muslims. I don't know why.
Bu'ijat means to like pierce, right? So who told the Prophet ﷺ that? Who told the Prophet ﷺ that women would wear spandex towards?
Oh, what?
Do you know what reference this is to?
No, I need to look it up. I just want to hear if he says a
It's
little bit
half
more.
dressed and half naked.
Yeah. They could be wearing anything if they're half dressed and half naked, and he equates it with spandex. Like, how do you
Because
get it?
because it contours the leg. It's like there's nothing there. You can see the contours of the leg. That's why you're supposed to wear this burqa or something that you don't see the contours of a woman. You don't see the ratio between the hips and the waist, which is supposed to be the most enticing thing for a man. So if this ratio is not visible because it's being covered by something, it's not there. So spandex allows you to see this. This is why you're not allowed to wear it.
Yeah, but other things allow you to see that as well, way before spandex ever came about.
Well, it's a tight-fitting type of clothing, which is
Yeah, sure.
clothing
I'm
you,
saying
but
there's
at the
other
same
types of
time
clothing.
showing the contours.
Yeah, but why specifically that clothing, right? And anyway, where's this verse so we can actually see what it says? Because often
I don't know
the
if he
latter
shows
days.
it.
Because they didn't understand that hadith kasiyatun ariyat, dressed and undressed at the
Yeah,
same time.
exactly. That's what I
We
thought.
understand
Undressed
that.
No, you don't. You're just making something up and claiming you understand it. Dressed and undressed at the same time is a contradiction. So to avoid a contradiction, you've got to make something up and say, well,
But
that
this is
it
exactly-
looks like it's undressed. No, my friend, if you're saying dressed and undressed and you're going to say it looks like it, I can say that about any verse. I mean, imagine this guy was on the show here. Oh, goodness.
Rob, this is eschatology. This is what they do. This is everything that they are bringing up for the end days are things that don't happen. The sun coming up from the west, the mountains floating past like clouds. So these are all things that are impossible, which are suddenly made possible to show that this is a once only event. After that, nothing is going to be the
yeah,
same.
but you can't have a contradiction, Stops. And just an answer to this question, we don't think that, but your Quran does. So again, it doesn't sound like you've ever read the Quran. We don't think that men are controllers, but your book says so. So again, if you have an issue with that, best read the Quran and decide on whether you accept it or not.
But why is the Muslim so stupid? I can't understand this. Okay,
Fortunately, right? I mean, we understand that. But who would have understood that in the 7th century Arabia? Read
who would have understood this?
Well, nobody understood in the 7th century Arabia, and nobody
Yeah,
understood.
but hang on, this is an American using English slang who would have, it's have, and it's only some British people who it substitute have into an of. Who would have understood that? Because normally in English it's who would have. So now you have an American who uses like an English dialect, transferring or whatever, making a have into an of. It's so weird for me.
understood that in the 7th century Arabia. Read the tafsir, they didn't understand it. They're like, how could you be dressed and naked at the same time?
Well, you
So they
can't.
said things like, kasiyat fi dunya, ariyat fil akhirah. Everybody's ariyat fil akhirah on the Day of Judgment. We now know what that means. The Prophet
you don't.
ﷺ said that
You just
people
claim
would
you do.
walk in marketplaces, badiyatul afkhad, with their thighs bare. Civilized people never do that. Primitive people don't create marketplaces. Primitive people barter. They live they don't have marketplaces. That's the difference
nonsense. There were
between
markets around at that
civilized.
time. What is he talking about?
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, the Kaaba was the marketplace. That's exactly city center. That's where the
This
markets
guy
were.
is supposedly an intelligent Muslim, or at least some Muslims think so. And this is what Islam does to the human brain. It switches off the critical thinking, and the brain is now looking for a pattern that it can connect with the Quran to convince itself, not any critical thinking person, I would add, but convince itself more that the Quran is true. So you look for things. Look what it says. That must mean the case. That helps me believe it. And maybe some gullible Muslims, but to the rest of us, we just look at this as if this guy is like, he's on a drug here, where the critical thinking has completely gone on vacation. It's like and I say it many times, it's a fascinating look into human psychology, where you've got to believe this sort of stuff to keep your book, believable to convince yourself and those that don't want to have critical thinking that it's true.
It's public relations, yeah.
But it's
One
but,
of the differences between civilized and so he's
Sorry.
No, carry on, it's cool.
talking about people in aswaq, in malls, walking with shorts on. Who told the Prophet ﷺ?
No, he's talking about
there's
markets. Where do you get malls from?
And it's bare thighs. You don't go
So
to a
many-
mall with bare thighs.
See, look how he changes from bare thighs to shorts on in a mall. I mean, this again, if you're watching this, listen to this, engage. Most of our viewers have got critical thinking, but those that don't, he swaps between a market to a mall and from a bare thigh to shorts, and now wants to equate that this is what the Prophet was actually talking about, not what the time is, and who could have told him that. This is just amazing, and he'll pat himself on the back and go to sleep feeling like he's done something amazing, and the rest of us will be face palming and wondering how a brain can be so short-circuited.
Yeah.
things that he said. Who told him that destitute Bedouin would be vying with one another to build tall buildings in the Arabian desert?
Yeah, okay.
Who told him that all this money
Stop
would
with
come
the-
to
with
the
the
Arabian
building
desert?
one again.
Who told him
They're not vying, they're getting people who actually understand how to build buildings, to build some buildings. They couldn't build it themselves if their life depended on it. And if they did, there would be low buildings. Those high buildings are by architects and engineers that are not Muslim. That's almost like a miracle by today's standards. So they're not vying themselves, they're paying other people. All they do is float around in the desert. They couldn't build a
that the
building
Arabian
like a Burj
Peninsula
Khalifa.
would be turned into gardens and have
Sorry,
green.
Thunderous wanted to say something there.
Yeah, I think I've said this before as well. One has to bear in mind that at that time in history, there already were, depending on your perspective, tall buildings, pyramids, the Colosseum, and other buildings. So depending on what your perspective is, how do you define a tall building?
Exactly.
You know, considering if you're an Arab where you're living in huts and things and tents and things like that, and you're a Bedouin, you go to somewhere like Rome if you're a trader, or some trader has just come back from Rome or some other location on earth like Egypt. He's going to come back with some absolutely fantastic stories about tall buildings.
Well, exactly, and those aren't tall by today's standards, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's a thing for the Facebook user, right? Again, how do we make this better? If God had said, in the year 1400 or whatever, however you want to do the Arabic version of that, there will be a building that is X height, and obviously they weren't using meters or feet or whatever the measurement is, and it will reach this height, and it will be completed in this year, and it'll be magnificent. It'll be done by people who are not Arabs. I would be going, okay, that's not bad. That's a bit more precise. Compare that, what I've just said, with this vague and vacuous claim, and then come back to us. But this is why I say we're here to help think, critical thinking, just like Thunderous did. What constitutes a tall building? No criteria. Could be 3 stories, it could be 5 stories. What's 100 stories? Is it 200 stories? When somebody else builds a taller building, what happens then? Does that claim disappear? Is it only relevant for like a few years? I mean, come on. Your God can surely do better than this.
Should be able.
I can.
Now you go and you can see these amazing gardens. I mean, they actually have skiing in Dubai. Like,
what does a garden have to do with skiing in Dubai?
have snow. So all these things. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, he told all these things.
No, he didn't. He talked about skiing in Dubai.
You read the signs of the end of time, and you're like, it's not like Nostradamus, where
it's exactly what it's like. Exactly.
These are like clear
actually got a few of them
signs.
better than yours. He got some
I mean,
wrong,
the Prophet ﷺ said that children. He said, "Al-mataru sayakunu qayda."
Stupid.
Like rain would be acidic. Qayd
No, he
means to
didn't.
burn. Who told him about acid rain?
No,
And then
That
who told him,
happened.
sallallahu alaihi
Stop it there. Stops. Go ahead, Thunderous.
That happened for one moment in history in the early 80s about the acid rain. You can't, if it predicted, say, global warming or El Nino, those sort of things would have been more incredible because you would not have even been able to consider the concept of global warming back in, or man-made carbon or any of these contributions, or nuclear power or nuclear waste, or fossil fuel, for instance, and the pollution that creates. That would have been an interesting thing to read in the Quran. But
look at the attitude. Look at a different kind of glasses. If you look at what things are impossible, well, water is supposed to cool you, and now all of a sudden it burns you. That's all it is. It's another thing that can't happen to a desert nomad at the time. It's just another thing. It's just
That's talking about like end times, isn't it?
It's
that sort of
equivocation.
thing.
This is
Yeah,
the
where
end
everything
times.
is
All he's doing is
inverted.
just equivocating certain words and saying, well, you see, the burning in there is the burning that we know from. No, it's not. It's a different ball game altogether. So that's crazy.
Well, why don't you come and talk on
about.
Discord
I
just
mean, we
now?
know. I'm
and the end time,
just saying.
the acid rain was a phenomenon. If I remember correctly, this took place somewhere, I think in Norway, Sweden. It was some part of Northern Europe, and it only happened for about 2-3 years. That was it.
Historically,
so it can't be anything.
these for us, these are all signs. He said, "Walwaladu ghayda," the child would be filled with rage.
Oh, no children
would be
are filled.
filled with rage. It's amazing. And he said, "يفيض اللئام فيضا ويغيظ الكرام غيظ." He said that the
Stops. We can
low
laugh
people
about it.
would
Stop
be
there for a second.
everywhere. And he said, "Noble."
We can laugh about it for sure, but it really is sad that somebody who otherwise sounds articulate will say this is amazing. It's if you think about it, really, it's a very sad indictment of a human brain that has been infected, and just where the critical thinking, where I've got to find something that remotely I can make some sort of vague, tenuous, vacuous connection, and then I'll sleep peacefully. Because this whole thing to me is, it's saying it for himself and the gullible. No critical thinking person could ever accept this.
Yep.
People would diminish. They would just begin to disappear. He said, how will you be when you're amongst the leftovers of humanity? Like the party's over. It's all the crumbs and the scraps. I mean, just look how people dress. Look how people have always dressed nobly throughout human history. Nobody ever dressed like modern people. Nobody.
People all over the world, in tribes around the world, dress much more, less modestly than people do today. And that was entirely natural, and it was fine. I mean, it's like this guy has never left a modern country. He's never been to a country where there are, other tribes and they're in tune with nature, and they don't see it as being evil or bad or whatever the case is. Like, this guy's like got blinkers on here.
He's trying to also, when
In
it says
history.
dress more nobly, you can see what he's trying to get at there. He's trying to give the image that the Arabs in Muhammad's day dressed more nobly back
Exactly.
then. That's what he's
That's
trying
all
to
it is. That's all it is.
Romans had togas. The Persians had their robes. All these people, I mean, even native peoples had their feathers because they knew, they had some sense of what human beings are. Now people walking out, they walk around
Forget that women used to walk around
hundreds of
topless and
dollars
stuff like that in
for
Africa,
rags.
North America, South America, Australia.
They pay
etc.
hundreds of dollars for rags. But what's happened to human beings that this is their state? I mean, you have to marvel at the leftovers. It's just amazing. But there were days, I mean, look, there were days when heroes walked the earth. Like now, they want to, every hero they just have to tear down. Everybody of any distinction, they have to tear them down. They have to destroy
doing
them.
that throughout
They have
history.
to expose.
They were trying to tear down heroes. And who are the heroes that he's referring to anyway? All quote-unquote heroes had a nemesis or nemesis. People would find the ill in them, try and tear them down. That's part of human nature from the beginning of time. What are you talking about?
Them, show how they're just like everybody else. There's nothing special about them. This is a sickness of people. It's all this leveling. And there were great people, and I've sat with sanctified souls. I know it. I've been in their company. I've been in their presence. I felt their
That's your
hal.
claim.
So
Now
these are
demonstrate it.
real. They're
Your
real.
feelings don't constitute a
And the
rational
awliya
argument.
are real. The people of Allah are real. And the lovers of the Prophet ﷺ, they know what they have, and they know what they have in their hearts.
Yeah, this is just
And the
rhetoric.
people that don't have that, they don't know. But Abu Hanifa said, if kings knew what we had, they would send their armies to take it from us.
What exactly do you have? You have a desert with some palm trees. Why would anybody want that? The only thing they want is the oil underneath there, which you guys couldn't make use of, didn't know existed, and somebody else had to come and do it there for you anyway. What are you talking about? You should really listen to Pascal's wager. Oh my word. Pascal's wager, again, we can educate you on Pascal's wager. It's an intellectually dishonest position and easy to show you. I'll use you as an example. Come on Discord, we'll give you the Discord link.